Hey guys, welcome. So one of my favorite series that I teach is the Healthy Hips class, and I always try to include a bit of hip mobility so we get things moving within the joint, some hip strength, and then the always lovely hip flexibility once we build a little bit of that heat and get things moving. So today's class is modeled after that, but just a little bit shorter practice, and we'll try and get a little of all of that within the practice today. So if you have a couple blocks, have them handy. If not, no worries. And we'll go ahead and just start in child's pose. You can take your big toes together and your knees out wide. And then settle your belly in between your thighs. Go ahead, stretch your arms forward and let your hips settle back. You can let your forehead rest to your mat. You could also bring a block underneath it here if it's feeling like the mat's pretty far away to start with. So find the place that feels a little supported there for your head. And then once you get all settled in, take your knees wide enough so it really feels like you can rest your ribs in between. And then get just a little active with your feet. So press down into the tops of your feet. And then press down and forward into your hands to settle your hips back towards your heels. Right? For some of us, this deeper knee flexion sometimes is a little too much, where you can let your hips come forward a little. You could slide something behind your knees for a little bit more support. Blanket, pillow, anything like that are nice options. And then just give yourself a couple moments here to bring your attention to your breath. You might let it start to get a little fuller or a little slower. And see if with every exhale, you can just let the hips settle down a little bit more towards your heels. And they might not actually move all that much, but just allowing the weight to start to settle. It's also just a nice time to get a sense of how things are feeling at the beginning of practice, how your body's doing today. And just take about 3 more breaths here. Slow and steady and full without forcing anything. And with your next inhale, go ahead, side forward to tabletop. And come to hands and knees. And just bring your knees a little closer together so they're right underneath your hips. Stack your hands under your shoulders. And then go ahead, just spread wide through your fingers and press down through your fingertips so there's some support. And then just a couple rounds of cat-cow. So as you inhale, arch your back, look forward. And as you exhale, round through your back, draw your chin to your chest, and really press your hands down into your mat. Good. Inhale, arch your back, look forward. And then exhale, round. And just use this moment to coordinate the breath and the movement. Right, so you're focusing on how those two match up. And to really lead this movement less from the shoulders, more from the pelvis. So you're feeling that, right, arch and round to the back. Take a couple more like that, right? And just think the slower the movement, the longer you can draw out the breath. Good. And then come back to center after you finish that next round. And then take a moment again, really firm through your hands so there's support. And find a little lift and tone through your low belly so there's some support there. And I'm just going to lift your right knee and start to make some big circles, right, whichever direction. So the tendency here is often for all the weight to lean onto the left knee and left hip, right? It might go a little bit of that direction, but see if you can somewhat keep the weight more to center. So we're just balancing out through the pelvis. Take that the other direction. And you might get a little popping, cracking movement within the joint. So I always think about movements like this as like the WD-40 for your joint. We're getting the fluid moving within the joint, which allows for more mobility. And then come back to center, but extend your leg out behind you. Take a full breath in. And then you're going to step your right leg all the way over to the right side of your mat. So that in general, you're working towards the hip, knee, and ankle being in one straight line with your toes pointing forward. Right? And so, as always, if it's not the right choice for you, you can move the leg back, adjust a little. We're going to take a little bit funky version on child's pose here. So if it works, wonderful. If it doesn't, come back to that first regular child's pose. Settle your hips back towards your heel, but keep your leg extended out towards the side. Right, and then really press down with the pinky edge of your foot. It may or may not actually be touching the mat. Just see if you can lengthen it, right, or towards the floor because it's probably off of your mat. If you can lengthen it out towards the side. Good, just take a couple full rounds of breath. Right, and again, if this feels awkward, sometimes is okay, painful, no good. Come back to that regular child's pose where we started. Okay. Sometimes I like to use my left hand towards my leg, use that help forward, and then step yourself back, tabletop, and just take a round of cat-cow in between. Arch and round. And then strong hands, tone belly, lift your left leg out to the side and do the same, just make some big circles. Be mindful if you're leaning all the weight to your right side and can you bring a little bit back to center. Okay, just go slow that you can really feel what's happening, switch direction. Sometimes, especially if there's little places within the joint that feel glitchy, yep, or like I just got some good pop and crack in that one. Okay, and then extend your left leg back. And then with your exhale, take a big step out to the left. Hip, knee, ankle in line, or working in that direction. And then walk your hands back, child's pose with your left leg extended out towards the side. Right, so the tendency here probably is for the pinky edge of the foot to roll away from the ground. Let's see if you can start to press in that direction, lengthening out that outer seam of the leg. Couple breaths. And with your next inhale, come back to center. Use your hands however they help support you. Step your leg back, tabletop. And then go ahead, just walk your hands forward about a palm print. Root through your fingertips and stretch your hips up and back, downward facing dog. Take your feet about hips width distance apart, like 2 fists in between. And you might even have a good bend in your knees here. If your legs can work to or towards straight, great. But if a little bend helps to ease hamstrings or low back, then do that. And then just really traction your hands, right? So press down and forward as you lift your hips up and back. So in that length through the spine, all the way down into the pelvis. Good, take a full breath in and full breath out. With your inhale, reach your right leg up towards the ceiling. Keep your pelvis level, so the outer right hip's gonna wanna lift up. Can you drop it down so that all 5 toes are pointing down towards the ground? And then with your next exhale, step your right foot all the way through. As you can use your hand, help the ankle along, bring your left knee down to the mat. And then come all the way up, bring your hands to your hips. And if your knee's really sensitive, you could fold your mat over and pat underneath a little bit. Good. With your hands to your hips, just feel if the hips are level, meaning first, does the right hip want to draw forward? Sometimes that's the tendency here. Right? We're just looking at the ways our hips want to go out of balance and how we can correct it. And so that might mean sliding the right hip back, right? So it feels like your hands are straight across from one another and one's not guiding forward. And then use your hands like you could draw the pelvis up, the front of the pelvis up towards your ribs. And that's going to help lengthen the tailbone and engage your belly. And then just a little bit of movement with breath. Take a full breath in, squeeze your legs together. And then exhale, just let your hips settle forward a little bit until you feel the right amount of sensation. Good. Inhale, slide your hips back. And then exhale forward. You're just starting to ease in, move with your breath into the mobility of the hip joint, but then also into the flexibility in the front of the left hip. Those hip flexors can get both tight and weak. So just easing in instead of forcing the range of motion there. Good, let's take one more. And then bring your hands down to your mat. Lift your back knee. Take a big step forward front of your mat. And lift halfway, inhale. Feet can be together or still hip width apart. And then exhale, fold. Good. One more like that. Inhale, lift halfway, and really press down from your hips to your feet. Lift your low belly up and in, and then draw your shoulders back so that your chest is open and the spine feels long. Okay, exhale, fold. Again, bent knees or straight legs. And with your inhale, come all the way up to standing. Exhale, hands together at your heart. Okay, just a little movement with breath. Reach up, inhale. Keep your spine long, hinge at your hips, fold forward, exhale. Lift halfway, take a breath in. Exhale, fold, plant your hands to your mat, step back to high plank, so the top of a push-up position. Right? You can keep knees lifted here, always bring knees down for a little bit more support, just some options. Root down into your fingertips and then grip, press your fingertips into the mat. Lift and tone through your belly. Take a breath in. And then with your exhale again, lift your hips all the way up and back, down dog. Okay, left leg up, inhale. And again, you can take a peek back at your toes, right? If the foot's turning out to the side, then the hip is lifting. If you can turn your pinky toe all the way down, the hips are more likely to be level. Inhale here. Exhale, step your foot all the way through. And then right knee down to your mat. Bring your hands up to your hips, Anjaneya Asana. Okay, and then just see where it feels like the hands are in space, helps you know where the hips are in space. Right? Often the tendency is for the left hip to pull forward a little bit, right? That's not everybody, but that happens. Right? So bring the hip back a little bit. And then feel like you could take your hands and roll them up. So you're rolling the front of the pelvis up towards your lower ribs. Keep the tailbone lengthening down. I feel like you could take that little zipper up through the low belly for support. Inhale here. And then exhale, let the hips come forward. That might be like a half an inch. That might be a few inches forward. And then inhale, come back. Good. Move with your breath. And see if you can keep the front bowl of the pelvis tilting up and the low belly coming up. Right? So there's a lot of support through the pelvis as you open. It also tends to resist a little bit the front of the hip. So we're actually getting more effective opening through those hip flexors. Okay, one more. And then plant hands, lift your back knee, take a big step forward front of your mat. Good, root down into your feet, inhale, lift and lengthen halfway. And then exhale, fold, just a nice spine extender. Inhale, come all the way up. Exhale, hands together at your heart. Okay, reach up, inhale, follow your breath rhythm. Exhale, long spine, hinge at your hips, fold forward, bent knees or straight legs. Lift halfway, take a breath in. Exhale, fold. Step your right foot back and then turn your feet to the long end of your mat. And just take a moment to line up your feet. So you want them parallel to one another. And then the outer edges of the feet parallel to the front and back of your mat. So your toes are pointing straight towards the long end of the mat. And then fold in. And again, you can bend knees a little bit here. Press down into your feet. And then from your feet to your hips, feel like you could draw that strength all the way up the line of the legs. Okay, inhale, lift and lengthen halfway. Could always use blocks here if you want some more support. Length under your hands. Exhale, fold. A couple times like that. As you lift and lengthen, really press into your feet and then stretch the top of your head forward. And exhale, fold. Halfway lift, inhale. This time, bend into your right knee. So you're either going to come here to this side lunge with your hands down, or you might bend the knee all the way, come down to Skandasana, right? We don't all have the hip, knee, ankle flexibility for this. So you might stay right here. Still a really great way to get into the hip joint. Okay, and then we're going to move this one a little bit with breath as well. Sometimes that slow movement with breath is really great for getting into the mobility of the hip. Inhale, come through center. And then exhale over to the left. Also really nice for the inseam of the leg, which attaches on the pelvis as well. Inhale through center. Exhale to the right. Just go with your breath rhythm. Through center, inhale. And to the left. Good, let's take one more each side. And back to the left. to the right, whichever side that was. I'm doing the opposite. Inhale through center, and then exhale, fold. Lift halfway, take a breath in. And then walk your hands to the front of your mat, step back, down dog. Again, really root through your hands here in down dog. Use this to lengthen the spine, so think all the way from neck to pelvis. As you press hands down and forward, lift hips up and back. Take a full breath. And with your inhale, reach your right leg up and back. And then this time, go ahead, open your hips. So stack your right hip on top of your left. Bend your right knee, and then press the sole of your foot back. And so we're getting into that front of the hip flexor again. Inhale, come back to center. Exhale, step your foot all the way through. And bring your left knee down. And this time you're going to keep your left hand down to your mat or even to a block. Sometimes a little extra height under your hand is nice. And then reach your right arm up to twist. Okay, let's make a couple adjustments to the foundation. So squeeze your inner legs towards one another. Good. And then untuck your back toes, press the top of your foot down. Sometimes that brings a little bit more engagement all the way up the back leg. And then reach up with your top hand. Hug your shoulder blade in towards your spine. So you roll your chest open into the twist. Right? And that strength of the legs is really going to support the pelvis as it comes forward to make space in the front of the hip flexors. Okay, inhale, unwind. Exhale, send your hips back, Ardha Hanuman half splits. This is another great place for blocks underneath your hands if you want a little more support there. You could wiggle your right heel forward just a little bit. And then really flex your foot. So draw your toes, curl your toes back towards your body. Press your right heel down and then traction it back. That often gets the hamstrings a little bit more engaged. And then keep that, but lengthen the crown of your head forward and soften your chest down towards your thigh. Again, that might move like a hair, right? Or some of us might have like belly down towards thigh. Your right knee might also have a little bend in it if that feels like the right place. So right, we work towards the alignment, but adjusting it to what feels right in your body. Okay, inhale, come forward, bend your front knee. And then this time you're gonna walk your right foot behind your left wrist and bring your right knee down, pigeon pose. This is one of those I always say works great in some bodies and not great in others. So the option here, if it isn't working, is figure four on your back. Right? For some of us, it's just not the right pose. Not every pose for every body. If it feels like your hips are way up off the mat, sometimes a block underneath your right hip feels really nice, right? So find the support that works for you. And then just take a moment to stay upright first. Squeeze your legs in towards one another. And like we did in that low lunge before, draw your outer right hip back, right? Think from the crease of the hip back. And then make sure your left leg is straight, hip, knee, ankle. Press down into the top of your left foot and press down into your outer right shin. Press that into the mat. Keep all that in your legs and then fold forward. You can bring forearms down. You can stack your hands and make a little pillow. Right, we won't stay here super long, but just take a few breaths. Keep the legs strong, but let the weight of the upper body settle a bit. And just notice where there's sensation. And stay steady with your breath. Walk your hands back, come on up. And then if you have a block under your hip, slide that out. You're gonna sit over onto your right hip, swing your left leg around. And you have a couple options here. You can do shin in front of shin, right? For a lot of us, that is plenty of hip opening. Or you can do shin on top of shin, right? Again, we're all really different with that range of motion and mobility within the hip joint. But wherever you're at, flex your feet. You might even scoot your flesh out from under your hips for a firmer seat. Right? And then really root down into your sitting bones, feel that connection, and lengthen up through your spine. Right? And then another option here, because sometimes staying upright feels like the place to land. There's a lot going on in the hips. It's good. Right? If you've got sometimes a little more range of motion, you might walk your hands forward and fold in. Right? You want to find that place that's effective but not straining. Sometimes a really good gauge of that is where your breath is at. Right? Can you still find full, steady breaths, even within the sensation? Right. And we built, we found a little bit of movement here, but some bigger, deep hip stretches in this shorter practice. So be mindful of where your body is. Okay. And then if you're folded forward, walk yourself back up, unwind your legs, and then take your feet to your mat about hip width apart. You can start with hands behind your thighs. Lift your chest, lengthen your spine. Okay. And then lift your shins up, Navasana, boat pose. Flex your feet. Right, so good for the core, but also really good for the hip flexors, strengthening at the front of the hip. And then some options here. You can keep hands behind thighs. You can release your arms, stretch them long. Or you may even start to straighten out through your legs. Find your variation, what works best today. Take a full breath in. Big breath out. One more inhale. And then with your exhale, cross your ankles, roll forward, step back, downward facing dog. Just take a moment to really root through your hands. Find that firm support, right? Because more weight's going to come to the hands when we lift the leg. Inhale, left leg up. And open your hip, bend your knee. Right, flex your foot and press the sole of your foot back. You feel a little opening along the left front hip. Maybe even into the side body. Inhale, come back to center, level off through your hips. And exhale, step all the way through. Bring your right knee down. And then keep your right hand down to the mat or even to a block. Sometimes a little height feels nice there. Inhale, reach your left arm up. Okay, and then squeeze your inner legs together, like you're hugging them in towards center. All right, draw the outer left hip back a little. And keep the outer left hip curling in and under, like you're scooping the sitting bone in towards the center line. Right, then from there, reach up with your left hand and hug your left shoulder blade in. Right, so we get that rolling open of the chest into the twist from the strength of the shoulder blade. Okay, inhale, unwind, bring your hand down, and then exhale, hips back, Ardha Hanuman half splits. And you can wiggle the heel forward a little bit, especially if it feels like the hips are going way back. Give yourself more space. Flex your left foot, press your heel down, and then traction the heel back. Right? So that movement without movement. Extend the crown of your head forward so the spine is long, and then soften a little chest towards leg. Take a couple breaths. All right, so when the hamstrings are tight, which happens on many of us, right, they touch at the bottom of the pelvis on the backside, so it can really work with where the tilt of our pelvis is. If the hamstrings are tight, it's pulling it back. Right, so we think about the hips themselves, but then all the muscles that attach around the pelvis can really determine, right, where our pelvis sits and the overall pelvic health. Inhale, come back, bend your front knee, and then walk your left foot over behind your right wrist and bring your left knee down. Right, so it's nice to have this angle from the outer hip, showing this side where you guys can see. Right, so that the knee actually comes wider than the hip. That often gives you a little bit more space here in this pose. Not for everybody, but it can. Right, you can slide support, a block, or even a pillow underneath your hip. And again, figure 4 on your back if this feels like not a great choice today. Okay, take a look back at your right leg and just straighten out hip, knee, ankle. Untuck the back toes, press down, and then really press down into your front shin as you draw the outer hip back. Keep all that in your legs, and then let yourself fold forward. Take a few breaths. Right, and so sometimes as we fold forward, kind of everything then drops again. You keep pressing into the outer front shin and hugging the legs into center. So there's a lot of support, even as we create that space. Good, come on back up. Sit your weight off onto your left hip, slide anything out if it's there, and then swing your right leg around. Right, and so same options, you might take a different variation side to side, shin in front or shin on top. Right, anchor your sitting bones, flex your feet, lengthen your spine. Take a breath in. And then either stay here upright or walk yourself forward. Sometimes that's just a couple of inches or a little more. Bring your attention to your breath. Notice sensation. Working not to force anything, but just to meet your body where it's at. Think about that like the consistency over intensity, little bits at a time. Give this space for your body to unwind, right, or create the strength that it needs. Good. Come on back up. Uncross your legs. And then again, one more time, we're going to do Navasana. So lift your shins, flex your feet, and lift your chest. Sometimes the tendency here is to lean back. Stay here for support, or bring hands forward, or bring legs towards straight. Good. Full breath in. Full breath out. One more inhale. And then exhale. This time, bring your feet back down to the mat. Take them out a little wider. Use your hands behind your hips. Roll forward, Malasana squat. Here's another great place for a block if you want 1 block or 2 blocks or 6 blocks underneath your hips. Bring hands to heart. And then give a little squeeze of your inner legs to your outer arms. Lift your heart. Drop down through your hips. Full breath in. Full breath out. Good. One more inhale. And then exhale, release your hands. Lift your hips. You can slide the block out if you're using that. And then walk your feet back in hips width distance. Bring your hands to your hips. With strong legs, inhale, come all the way up. And then exhale, bring your hands together at your heart. Good. Take a full breath here. And then go ahead and start with your feet together. You're going to find a focus point for your eyes. Work a little with balance. Stand into your left foot and then bring your right foot in for tree pose. So options here, right? You can do toes down. Sometimes that little extra support is really nice, especially if it feels like it's hard to stay in the pose. You can bring shin to your, or foot to your shin, or to your upper inner thigh. Bring hands to heart. It's where that gaze point can be really helpful. Right? Our eyes help us a lot with balance. Okay, you can keep hands to heart or reach your arms up. See what feels like a better option today. But really root down through your standing foot. And then press the sole of your foot and your inner thigh, like again, that hugging into center. And then even press a little bit more into the pinky edge of your lifted leg. See if that broadens, engages through the outer hip. Right, then sometimes that takes the left hip forward with it, tack that back. Good, find your breath. Sometimes that goes when we're balancing. Balance pose is great for the strength in the standing hip. Right, so the whole left hip's really working hard to stabilize when you're just standing on one leg. Okay, and then inhale, bring your right knee up. Exhale, send your leg back. Warrior 3. So you might just have toes lifted a little bit. You might come a little bit more towards parallel with the ground. And like we did in that down dog, level out through your hips so let the outer right hip roll down. Keep your back leg strong and reach your arms back. Steady through your left leg. Okay, inhale, stand all the way up, reach up. And then exhale, both feet down, hands to heart. Take a breath, stand on both feet, feel that strength. And shift your weight to your right and bring toes in. So again, either toes down for a little more support, shin, or upper inner thigh. Might have different variations again, side to side. Doesn't have to match. Our bodies aren't always even. Hands to heart or reach your arms up. Find your steady gaze point. Root down strongly from your right hip to your right foot, press down. And then press your left foot and your right inner leg, squeeze them into center. Press a little bit more through the pinky edge of your left foot. Tone through your belly. Keep your chest open and your breath steady. Okay, inhale, bring your knee up. Exhale, press your foot back, warrior three. Right, so again, you might even tap toes here for a little support. Start to lift, right? Or come forward, lift the leg up. Flex your foot, roll your outer left hip down. Right, that tone through the low belly here can help support in the balance. And then open up through your chest to draw your shoulders back. Find your steady gaze point on the ground. Good. Inhale, stand all the way up. Nice strength through the right hip. Exhale, both feet down. Okay, inhale, reach both arms up. Exhale, fold forward. Halfway lift, inhale. Fold, exhale, plant your hands. Step back, downward facing dog. Take a breath. Inhale, slide forward, high plank. And then exhale, either with bent knees or straight legs, lower all the way down to your belly. And go ahead, roll up onto your left side. And you're just gonna prop your head up in your hands. Right, so the trick here, or what makes it really effective, is to line up your elbow, your shoulder, your hips, and your feet. And when you do that, you might find things get a little wobbly. That's good. That's where we want to be. That means like our stabilizing muscles are working really well. Right, so having the right fingertips down, that can be helpful. It gives you a little extra support. Okay, and then we're going to take that tree pose hip opener here. So bend your right leg. And again, you might do shin. You might do upper inner thigh. Just try to avoid the knee itself. It doesn't love getting pushed in the other direction. And then really press foot and leg into one another, just like we did standing. Press even a little bit more into the pinky edge of your right foot. What do you notice that does for the hip? You can keep your right hand down or try lifting it up. Things are probably going to wobble. That's good. Keep really pressing through the outer edge of your bottom foot, the leg that's straight. Sometimes that can help a little bit with stability. Good. And then keep pressing through the pinky edge, outer edge of your right foot as well. One more full breath. Simple, but effective. It's one of those ones that just feels like we're just lying there. Okay, unwind the top leg, roll through center, and then roll off onto your right side. Okay, line up, shoulder, hip, knees, feet. Flex your feet, really press through the bottom foot. And then bend your top leg, right? Inner shin, inner thigh, just above or below the knee joint, please. Okay, so the hips probably going to want to roll back. Can you press the pelvis a little forward? Press strongly through the pinky edge of your top leg, right? Not that it's painful, just that it's really engaging. And keep the bottom leg rooting down. And your top hand, your left hand might stay with the fingertips down for a little bit more support, or you can try lifting the hand up. If it's really easy and you don't feel anything, that likely means the body's not in that straight line. And we just play with how to get there so that we're really working all those good deep stabilizing muscles. Okay, take another breath. And then unwind the top leg. Come all the way back to your belly. Bring your hands by your sides. Stretch back, child's pose, just like where we started. Give yourself a few full breaths. Good. And then come forward. Go ahead, come all the way down, have a seat. Right. I like to sit up on a block sometimes, or even a blanket or pillow, and you're going to come to seated. You can slide that under your hips, especially if it feels like your knees lift way up. It's nice to give the hips a little height. Right, so we're going to take a few minutes seated instead of regular Shavasana. So if you're craving that, you just want to lie down, you're welcome to do that. Otherwise, you can take whatever cross-legged seat feels comfortable. And I'll just encourage you to take, because I always do it, we usually have one leg that always goes in front. Switch sides. It'll likely feel a little like you have to adjust things around. Bring your hands to your thighs. And I have the idea of being here that just sitting cross-legged, especially on the ground, something that we don't often do as adults unless we're doing yoga. And it's really a simple but super effective hip opener. And so let the sitting bones settle. Sit tall and let the shoulder blades come back and down. Bring your attention to your breath. And just give yourself a few moments here, steady rhythm of breath. Making sure that the sensation in the hips feels effective, but not past that. And where we can give a moment, just let the practice settle into the body. Even in a shorter practice, to just take that few moments of stillness, of quiet at the end. That's where everything just integrates. And take a few more breaths, slow and steady. And then bring your hands together at your heart. And take a moment, thank yourself, carving out this time for your practice, for your body, for your breath. Thank you so much for sharing the practice today. Namaste.